بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وأحلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ وعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. First of all, let me send my condolences to the Imam of our time, the Rahbar of the Ummah, the Maraji, and all of you. On the arrival of the 10th of the month of Ramadan and the wafat of BIbi Khateja Kubra, salamullah alayha, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspire us, enlighten us to tread the path of her amazing legacy. Every year I make it a point to talk about certain points when it comes to her wafat majlis, and this year will be no different. It's sad to me that throughout the Islamic calendar, the entire year, we only have really one dedicated day for discussion on this woman that Islam owes a lot to. And the reality is that when we look at her in terms of her lineage, her legacy, her sacrifice, her courage, her bravery, her reliance on God, all of these are legacies left behind for you and I today to apply. So let me, first of all, let all of you know that she has always been a part of a very pure lineage. And if you trace her generation back, I believe 4 or 5 different levels up, she actually meets the lineage of the Holy Prophet of Islam. She's the daughter of Khuwaylid. Khuwaylid is the son of Asad. Asad, the son of Abdul Uzza. Abdul Uzza is the son of Qusay. The Holy Prophet is the son of Abdullah. Abdullah is the son of Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim. Hashim, the son of Abd Manaf. Abd Manaf, the son of Qusay. So 5 levels up now, she meets that same bloodline of the Holy Prophet, number 1. Number 2 is when you look at her father, Khuwaylid ibn Asad. He was right beside Abdul Muttalib, the very famous and courageous grandfather of the Holy Prophet, as the guardians of Mecca, the caretakers of the Kaaba, the ones who held the keys to the Kaaba. And, Abdul Muttalib is obviously, his stories, his legacy, what he left behind is very well known. However, what gets lost sometimes is that the one right beside him in this was the father of BIbi Khateja. A quick story from the story of the elephant, from the Ashab Fil story that all of you know very well. That when the king of Yemen, the king of Abraha now looked to destroy the Kaaba, he first looted Mecca. And when he looted Mecca, he stole about 200 camels that belonged to Abdul Muttalib. Now, like I said, he was the main chief of Mecca, the caretaker of the Kaaba. And when Abraha summoned Abdul Muttalib, and Abdul Muttalib came to see him, the only thing Abdul Muttalib asked for was his camel's back. Now, by then, it was very well known that this man is going to destroy the Kaaba with his army of massive elephants. And what shocked Abraha was the fact that that was never a discussion by Abdul Muttalib. He never once even brought up the idea of the Kaaba being attacked. All he cared about was his 200 camels. And Abraha says, I'm surprised at you, that you've come all this way to see me, and all you're concerned about are the camels. Not once did you ask me to stop my intended attack on the Kaaba. And it's a very beautiful statement by Abdul Muttalib, a very famous one, where he says, look, I am the owner of my camels. I'm here to protect my camels. The Kaaba has its own owner, and he will protect the Kaaba. That beautiful statement, a very monotheistic statement, a very tawheedi statement by Abdul Muttalib, far before the arrival of his grandson, the Holy Prophet, and the announcement of Islam. So this was a man who was a monotheistic, who believed in one Allah, who believed in God and his staunch support of God. But right beside him was Khuwaylid ibn Asad, the father of BIbi Khateja. On her mother's side, her mother's brother, meaning her maternal uncle, Wali-e ibn Nawfal, was a man who was a very pious man, a Christian monk. And unfortunately, the only instance sometimes that we know of him in history is this distorted and untrue, fabricated hadith that when the Prophet had no idea what was happening in the cave of Hira, when Jibril came and first revealed to him the first 5 verses of Surah Alaq on that night of Bi'athat, and some Islamic sources tell us that he came down from the cave of Hira, bewildered, upset, confused, hearing voices. He seemed like he was going a little bit mad. Na'udhu billah. Comes home to his wife, BIbi Khateja, tells her about what happens, is very, very confused. She takes him to her uncle Wali-e ibn Nawfal, and he tells our Holy Prophet that you, in fact, are that prophet that our books now prophesized. Okay? As the Shi'as, we reject that, of course, but that's the only instance of the mention of this name as some afsana, of some fictional story of Wali-e ibn Nawfal, when in reality, he was one of the few individuals in Mecca that would stand at the door of the cemetery and beg these fathers who are about to bury their newborn daughters alive and tell them that, look, please stop this heinous act. Women were seen as commodities. Women were seen as liabilities, especially newborn daughters. Newborn daughters can't go to war, they can't work. So they can't bring home any sort of pride or money or fame, or on top of that, you had all sorts of expenses. So not all the tribes, but some of the tribes would, of course, bury their daughters alive. He would stand there, Wali-e ibn Nawfal, the maternal uncle of BIbi Khateja, and say, please do not do this. If this is about money, I will give you money. Just don't do this act. And the third instance is of her own brother, Awam ibn Khuwaylid. Where alongside the Holy Prophet now, they create this team, Hilful Fuzul. And, basically this is before prophethood, a team or a movement that looked to protect the consumers inside Mecca. There would be a lot of complaints from people coming to Mecca to do trade and business. The Meccans would take our goods, but they would never pay us on time. And so the complaint of the business individual was very well known. And the Prophet now did something about it, established now this law and order where, they had consumer rights were protected. The one beside the Holy Prophet in establishing this was Awam ibn Khuwaylid, the brother of BIbi Khateja. So she came from a pure lineage. Never do we have in history that she had worshipped an idol. On top of that, What she was able to accomplish at that stage and at that era is incredible. And I'm sorry, this is not just for our sisters. Sometimes we hear about BIbi Khateja and BIbi Zainab and BIbi, and we hear, okay, this is good for our sisters and our women. No, for us men as well. Number one is, we have reduced her, I'm sorry, just to a blank check for Islam. And yes, her generosity is incredible, but she did so much more than that to establish a business, to take over her father's business in Mecca, then to bring it to the heights of success at a time where, like I said, women were commodities. They were part of spoils of war, guys. They were bought and sold like trade, women were. At that moment, for a woman now to do that, to the point where she was known as Malikatul Arab, the queen of the Arabs, is incredible. She didn't allow her gender, or didn't allow the chauvinistic and misogynist and male-dominant society to be a barrier for her. She had confidence in her ability. She knew what she wanted. Can you imagine some of the remarks she must have heard, the comments, the arguments, the rejection, simply because she was a woman? And as men, we can never understand that, but our sisters very much, even today, maybe in fact, especially today, can really truly understand that. So to my young girls out there, my young sisters who aspire to be something, take the legacy of BIbi Khateja. She didn't allow her gender to be a barrier, didn't allow anyone to talk her down from what she wanted to do. That's point number one. Point number two is, and these are 2 points I want to focus on. I'll be done by 7:10, inshallah, with Masaib. So give me about 20 minutes of your time. Inshallah, zahmat tamam. The 2 biggest things that I can pull away from her when it comes to her life, and these things require, not 1, not 2, maybe 10 or 15 different lectures to understand. She requires an ashra for her wafat. But we're given 35, 40 minutes every single year to talk about that woman back then, when everything was all about fortune and everything was all about, how much you made. At that moment now, for her to achieve what she achieved was one thing. But her beauty was she never allowed herself to attach herself to her achievement. I mentioned this in one of the Q&As in our classes. Achievement, yes. Attachment, no. Islam says achieve. My young guys out there who are listening to me, my sisters out there, my young sisters out there who are listening to me, we require all of you young guys to be the best possible version of you can be, including professionally. Education, education, education. Please. Okay, we require you guys to be on the lines. A Muslim doctor, a Muslim lawyer, a Muslim nurse, a Muslim accountant, a Muslim business individual, an educated, stay at home. A lot of my sisters say, Sayyid Asad, with all due respect, you're asking me to now further my education, get my degree. I'm just going to end up raising my kids at home. Even if you have the noble job of raising beautiful kids at home and you become a murabbi and you work with Allah, not as a partner, God forbid, but you work with Allah to raise God-pious children. Even that, when you are educated and you are an intelligent mother, you raise balanced, God-fearing, ideal citizens of society. But when you do reach that achievement, and with that comes a comfortable life, an affluent life, a life of pleasure and luxury perhaps, don't allow yourself to attach to this wealth to the point where now you sell your soul out. BIbi Khateja achieved a lot. When it came time for her to give, she gave without a single hesitation. Even to the point when she had nothing to offer, she gave whatever she could. The verse I read for you in the khutbah from Surah Ali Imran, Allah describes the ones who are beloved in the eyes of Allah. And he talks about 3 qualities of those beloved of Allah. الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ. They are the ones who give. They give when things are easy to give for them. They give when things are difficult for them to give. When things are tight and Beit-al-Asr asked for donations. We think, oh, it's a pandemic, things have been tight, money's not rolling in, we lost our job. At that moment, to give is very difficult, but that's when the tawakkul of Allah kicks in. That's when we invest in God, knowing full well there's a 10 return on investment waiting for us. And then, of course, giving when there is excess, mashallah, is easy, right? That's easy. وَكَاذِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, they control their anger. وَعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, they forgive people. These three are who? وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah loves the beautiful doers, the good doers, the one who bring about beauty in society. This was a woman who gave. She gave when things were easy to give. She gave when she had nothing left as well. She never allowed herself to attach herself, which again points to the idea that she comes from a very pure lineage, and the love of this dunya, the lure of this dunya, the attraction of this dunya never infiltrated her hearts. She believed in the mission of the Holy Prophet to the point where she gave everything she could. So to my young guys out there, any of you now establishing your career, establishing your business, starting to make a good salary, that's amazing. Don't think that God or Islam is not happy with you. You've done it the hard way. You've studied. It's halal risk now. You're not ripping off your employees or your customers, hopefully. You're not price gouging in a pandemic, hopefully. You're making good, hard-earned money and clean money. Enjoy that money. Nothing wrong with it. Don't attach yourself to the point where you place a value higher than it actually has. Point number 2 is her spouse selection and her ability now to judge character. Belonged to a very noble tribe, a very successful woman. She had no shortage of proposals for marriage. And the way the history describes it, the cream of the cream, the most affluent of tribes, the best of the best. You would be a foolish woman to say no to half the proposals that she got. By one, she said no, 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 no. And who does she want to marry? She wanted to marry the Holy Prophet. She's the one that instigated that process. She's the one that actually sent someone to go, quote unquote, spy on him, follow him, get to know him, do your research about him. And they came back and saying there's nobody more nobler. He is noble. He is principle valued. He's hardworking. He remembers God. He's pleasant. But he was a shepherd, a simple man, living a simple life. He wasn't known to be a rich man, an affluent man. He wasn't known to be somebody who was influential yet. Quiet, reserved, would go and isolate himself every so often, either in the fields when he would shepherd his sheep, or in the cave when he would go and meditate or pray. But she had enough awareness to understand that this is a life partner I'm trying to choose. This guy might have money, this guy might have influence, but will he bring me close to my Creator or not? I ask my young guys out there who are right now in that stage of life, in that season of life where now you've begun to talk with your parents about the possibility of finding a spouse, or right now you are accepting proposals or you're sending proposals. I don't know. But I ask you humbly, please, I'm tired of getting phone calls from these young couples who are falling apart at the seams because they had no business getting married to begin with. Islam has laid out already a short list of characteristics to look for in a potential spouse. And I want to spend a little bit of time because this is a burning need of the community. And these majalis and these commemorations, we will do her no justice, BIbi Khateja, if we leave her as a historical figure. We have to adopt what she did and begin to put out the fires with the water she supplies. Otherwise, there's no point in me addressing this majlis. I'm sorry. As an annual tradition, as something to do, har saal karte hain, okay, no. We use it now to what? To heal the wounds, to address those difficult situations. And right now, our marriages and the process by which we choose spouses needs to be addressed time and time again. Islam says piety, piety, piety. Now, I'm not asking you to not marry somebody who who has a good job, who has work. Of course, there's 4 or 5 lists, right? There's piety, there's a good family system, right? Good genetics in terms of a good solid family, a good wholesome, pious, holistic family. There's education, of course. There is compatibility, right? Are you guys compatible? And of course, there's physical looks. Islam says, of course, you have to be attracted to the one that you marry, no doubt. But sometimes we put the 4 aside, we jump to the 5th one. And the green eyes says, okay, let's do it, Dad. A 6'3" frame, let's do it, Dad. A couple of extra zeros than me in the account, let's do it. They come from a very rich family. But he doesn't have anything spiritually. Will he lead your family? Will he be the one that the Quran refers to? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum naran. O you who believe, protect yourself and your family from the fire. Does the man you're about to marry now, he might have those smoky eyes, but will he lead you and your family and your kids to the pearly gates of heaven? And that's why when you look at some of the ahadith by our Ahl Bayt, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, he says, if you're going to marry for money and beauty and not piety, know that after a while you will lose all 3 of them. Allah. The money will deplete, the beauty will fade, the piety was never there to begin with. After a while now, you have nothing left. And I've seen that so many times. I've seen individuals marry for looks. After a while, the person, because they don't have inner beauty, the outer also looks ugly to them. After a while, when you have access to so much money and fine, I got everything I wanted, take all of it. I just want a stable marriage. The hadith goes on to say, when you marry for taqwa and maybe the money and beauty isn't there, in the beginning, but piety is there. Now, I'll talk about how to measure piety in a moment. He says, when you do that, you'll get all 3 of them. Piety was already there. As you travel on the path towards Allah's worship, Allah, of course, will open up the doors of rizq for you. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Surah Talaq, verses 2 and 3. For the one now who has piety, Allah will create an outlet for them. Allah will provide them rizq from a source that they never even accounted for. What you thought was a dead end was a door. In fact, Allah opened the door for you, walk through, and rizq came your way. On top of that, when you start to see the inner beauty of the person, striving to be better, cleansing themselves, having khush akhlaq, treating your family well, treating yourself well, being a loving parent, then there's nobody more beautiful in your eyes than your own spouse. The beauty comes, the money comes, the piety comes, everything comes in one package, provided piety is the leading characteristic. Now you'll ask me, Asad, sometimes I have 4 or 5 talks with the guy. How do I measure piety? And yes, it's absolutely a risk. Even when you marry, sometimes I've seen people marry their first cousins. They've known their whole life. Families, the mothers are siblings. It falls apart. I'm not telling you that it's all gonna be great. No, Allah says, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. I've placed between you compassion and mercy, but I've given them to you as starting tools. You have to cultivate that. There's seeds I'm giving you. You have to plant those seeds, then grow those seeds and maintain those seeds. How do we do it? I'll tell you a few tricks. I ask you, please, especially my parents, after all of this information, how many marriage seminars, how many talks on marriage, how much things on Instagram, how many posts, how many WhatsApp videos within our deen, even outside of our deen, even in this, even those who are irreligious people talk about secrets of a happy marriage. After all of that, I still get phone calls. I still talk to some women in our community who do this. My mother, I love my mom. My mother does this indirectly. Okay, she matches people up indirectly. Indirectly meaning it's not like an actual, unofficially is a better word. Okay, people call her this and that, and she calls me. She goes, "Asad beta, halat bahut kharab hai aajkal." I go, "Kya hua ma?" She's like, boy, when I asked him what kind of girl do you want, they go towards the eye color, the skin color, they go towards the weight, they go towards, a certain village, and later on, hijab, dindar, namazi, rozadar, this and agar hai, mumkin hai, theek hai, that's not a कोई अहमियत नहीं है इसका, लेकिन गोरी, patli, lambi. Come on, man. In this day and age, that shallowness is there. I've even heard people say, oh, you know what, our complexion is nice and white. I want to make sure that my grandkids also continue that. So make sure that you marry somebody who's of a wider complexion. Let me remind you, and I don't mean to be harsh, but sometimes we need to be a little bit harsh. And all of you know me, I can be. There's no takallufat between me and you. I can be this harsh. The one thing that shaytan had a complaint when it comes to Adam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked shaytan, why did you not do sajdah? I'm giving you a chance to explain yourself. He could have said anything. I worshipped you for 4,000 years. He comes along all of a sudden now, right? But where did he go? Where did he go? Ana khayru minhu, khalaqtani min nar wa khalaqtuhu min tin. I'm better than he is, right? You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. And shaitan thought that it was the outward of Adam that made him so grand and great in Allah, but it wasn't. فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. Look at where the command to go into sajda is. Allah says, when I molded him, when I made his form, and then I blew in him from my spirit. Once that spirit goes into Adam, فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. Go into sajda, meaning what? The hukam to prostrate in front of Adam. What made Adam qabil sajda, worthy of prostration, was not his form. It was the fact that Allah's spirit was blown into him. It was the hidden, the batin, the spirit of Adam, the potential of Adam, the grandness of Adam. He was the insan. That's what made him grand. But all shaitan saw was clay, fire, clay, fire. So essentially what we're doing is when we see a potential a spouse for my son, all I see is, okay, well, she's a little bit of a darker shade than usual. She could lose about 10, 15 pounds. Choti is rasa, so she's a little bit tiny, this and that. And without even asking her a single question, this girl hasn't uttered a single word. And no, not this one. It's disgusting, I'm sorry. It's satanic. It's the seeda of shaitan. Maafi chahta hu main aapse. I'm sorry. It's the seeda of shaitan. BIbi Khateja saw the character of Rasulullah. Yes, he was a nurani face. I'm not saying that. But what drove her towards the Holy Prophet, what made her reject all of these grand proposals, quote unquote, was the fact that she saw that this man was a man of character, a man of God. Now, how do I measure that, Asad Bhai? In 4 or 5 conversations. Number one, when you talk to a potential spouse, and by the way, I asked my parents, and by the way, it happens more. I mean, Zamana, badal gaya. I mean, kafi tabdeel aa gaya. I mean, obviously there's a lot of change. It's good change. Now it's a dialogue between the child and the parents. But nonetheless, it's important that, we allow these potential spouses now to talk over text, over the phone, and yes, even meet up personally, albeit in a supervised, isolated area. What I mean by that is that Islam allows you to initially email or even text, talk on the phone. Please be very careful. They're still not madam to you. We're not heeing and hooing to each other, but we are trying to get to know the person within the confines and the hudud of Sharia. And then, of course, meeting up, going for a coffee, going for a walk, but supervised. We're not leaving 2 nahman people alone at the age of 21, 22, when shaitan becomes the third person, hadith says. So if they are coming over to your house, then you can allow those 2 to go in your backyard, keep the windows open, keep the door open, let them talk privately, and we go inside the house, those kind of things. In that conversation, if you are in that process right now, where you are conversing with a potential suitor for marriage, you have to make those conversations fruitful and beneficial. talking about the weather or talking about this episode or that cliffhanger, or you can do it indirectly. Neither are we going to have a list of 20 questions. What's the sixth Imam's name? Where's Imam Hussein buried? Whoa, dude, calm down. This is not rapid fire Islamic quiz. I had one guy. Before he spoke to his potential spouse, he had 25 questions for her. And that was his one and last conversation with her. She's like, I'm out. This guy's crazy. I'm not saying that either. You can be smart about it. For example, talk about your family. Bring up stories with you and your siblings, your childhood, trips you might have taken, memories you have lodged in your heart and your brain. Share that with a potential spouse. See, does he or she now reciprocate and tell him about great stories, laughing about his siblings? If he does, boom, he's a family guy. At least on the surface. Now, number two is talk about your community. Talk about BIbi, talk about New Jersey, talk about how you're involved in the center there. Talk about the programs. Talk about how amazing Asad Jafri is and his camps. Talk about those things. And does he talk about his community? If he does, he's a community guy. If their silence is changing the subject, talking about, I don't know, this or that, then it's like those are a little bit of red flags. My point to my sisters and my brothers, to my parents out there who have kids at the age of marriage, to my youth out there who are looking for spouses alone, take the Sida and the legacy of BIbi Khateja, please, and look for merit and character and value and principles and God consciousness to the best of your ability. I'm not saying the guy might fake it, and after that's a risk you take. But with research, with the family, with the proper conversations, inshallah, it will work. I'm tired of people marrying just for beauty. And 6 months in, that beauty gets old real fast, man. And then what's left is the true character of that person that you never bothered to even consider. BIbi Khateja salamullah alayha left behind for us a legacy, principles that we can apply today. She had courage, bravery, gave up everything for the deen, never attached herself to her wealth, never allowed herself to be lured by people that might be on the outside beautiful, but inside they were superficial. And her sacrifice was to the point where even her last few days, when she passed away in the 10th year after Bi'athat. So she didn't even see the migration to Medina. She didn't see the glory days of Islam. She saw the first 10 years, the first decade in Mecca was very hard. At the end of the Mecca era of the prophethood was the most difficult of his prophethood, right? That was the Shibba Abu Talib years. That was the year where he and his followers, the Prophet of Allah, was banished from Mecca. Sanctions, heavy sanctions placed on him, economic, social, you name it. At that moment, what got them through that barren land, no resources, was the wealth and the generosity of BIbi Khateja. But that was where she fell sick. And that was when she passed away. And she gave away everything she possibly could to the point where there wasn't a coffin for her to wrap her body. And whatever coffin they could bring, they would bring. And some say that when she was finally wrapped in a coffin, just to make sure that the wrapping was proper, the Prophet would take off his abba from his back, wrap the body of his wife. Such a sign of love from a husband that, for 1 year cried for his wife. Amul Huzn, the year of sorrow. The same year Abu Talib passed away, it was the same year that BIbi Khateja left him, and that year was very hard for him. But he was so adamant, the Prophet of Allah was so adamant, that I want her to be buried properly. I want her to be wrapped properly. I want that coffin to be on properly. If there was a shortage in the coffin, he would make up for it with his abba. He was adamant that I want her to be respected when she passed away. And I would say this to you, Ya Rasulullah, you were so adamant about your own wife, BIbi Khateja, having the proper burial rites, having the proper coffin. Come to the plains of Karbala on the day of Ashura, Mawla. Come and your grandson, Imam Hussein, lying there for 3 days on the desert sand of Karbala. There's one report I always mention, one thing that Imam Hussein did that I always find ajib and strange, but it makes sense to me now. On the 2nd of Muharram, he arrives in Karbala, finds out this is a place called Karbala. He then summons the Bani Asad tribe and the men he speaks to first. He says, "Oh, men of the Bani Asad tribe, there'll be a battle here. We will be killed brutally. Our bodies will be trampled by horses. If you can, please, just bury us one by one." He then puts up a partition now, and he talks to the women of the Bani Asad tribe. "If your men are not able to bury us, then all of you collectively just dig one massive grave, please, and place our bodies inside that grave." He then went so far, my Mawla did, my Muslim Imam went so far to speak to the small children of the Bani Asad tribe, picked up some children, kissed them on their cheek, hugged them, held them in his lap. "Are you a Muslim?" "Yes, we are." "Do you recite the kalama?" "Yes, we do." "That Muhammad Rasulullah is my grandfather. My name is Hussein ibn Ali. I'm the son of Fatima. There's going to be a battle here. If your mothers and your fathers are not able to bury us, then please look at my Muslim Mawla. Please pick up the khak of Karbala with your small, tiny Masum hands and simply drop it on our bodies." Why? Why, Imam Hussein, the need to do that? When somebody passes away in our community, no one says, "Please bury my father. Please bury my mother. Please bury my..." It's a given. Where that person passes away, the funeral and the ghusl committee now, gets into action right away. But this was Imam Hussein, who knew that for 3 days his body would be left in the plains of Karbala. Not only that, his body would be disrespected. Umar ibn Saad says on Asri Ashur, now close to Maghrib, announcing, "Now I want 10 volunteers to come, change the hooves on their horses, and begin to trample the body of Hussein." 5 horses on the one side of Hussein, 5 on the other. By his command, the 5 horses on the right would move to the left, the 5 on the left would move to those who are to the right. The khak of Karbala in the air. Hussein lies at the bottom of this stampede. Wal Mal'un narrates, Sheikh Abbas Qumi narrates in Nafasul Mahmoom, that Wal Mal'un says that when my horse now trampled the body of Hussein, I could hear the cracking of his ribs. Matem ya Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein.